Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Ms. Tish Long, Chairman of the Intelligence and National Security Alliance and former Director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, and Robert Shea, Lieutenant General, United States Marine Corps, retired, President and CEO of AFCEA International.
Yours is live.
You want to try this? You want to try this, Tish? That may be our...
Okay. Testing, testing. Here we go. That works. All right. Good morning to everyone, and welcome to the 6th Annual Intelligence and National Security Summit. Thank you all so much for being here. And a warm welcome to Michele Flournoy and General Joe Votel, who have joined us for lunch today. They will be providing what I am sure is a very provocative discussion to kick off the summit this afternoon, and we'll have a formal introduction of them after lunch. Over the next 2 days, senior leaders from across the armed forces, government, industry, and academia will examine emerging challenges and top mission priorities, as well as the role of industry and innovation in advancing practical and creative solutions. For the second year, the Unclassified Summit will have a classified follow-on program at the NGA Campus East in Springfield. This year, the Classified Day takes place next week on Thursday, September 12th, and we hope to see many of you there as well. The OD&I Deputy Director for Mission Integration, Beth Stanner, will kick off the TSSCI program, and that includes panels on IC budget and investment priorities, supply chain security, AI, cyber, and space. Attendees will also hear from Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, Dr. Lisa Porter. Registration information and program details are available at the AFCEA and INSA booths outside.
The summit is a unique event. INSA and AFCEA are two organizations founded in the principle of public-private partnership in pursuit of national security. We've partnered for 6 years and sustained the premier forum for unclassified dialogue between the United States intelligence agencies, their partners in the academic and private sector. A key component of the program is your participation. The summit is strengthened through your questions, engagement during breaks, interaction with exhibitors, and discussions with participants. So please, don't be shy. An event of this type and size is not possible without sponsorship. Tish and I would like to thank our premier sponsors, Guidehouse, KBR, Maxar, Perspecta, along with Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Amazon Web Services, Micro Focus Government Solutions, Northrop Grumman, Parsons, Thomas Reuters Special Services, and all the sponsors who are shown on the screen and in your programs. Their support and their company's belief in the value of the public-private dialogue are both gratifying and critical to the success.
Also critical to the summit's success are Chuck Alsop, President of INSA, and Lieutenant General Bob Noonan, Chair of the AFCEA Intelligence Committee, who over the course of the last 12 months led the planning teams to ensure the summit remains an indispensable engagement opportunity. Today and tomorrow, they will be working hard to keep the trains running on time and to help ensure you have a productive and useful summit experience. A big thank you to Bob and Chuck for your leadership and dedication. Now, as many of you are already aware, Chuck has announced he plans to retire by the end of the year, which makes this his last summit as president of INSA. Chuck has been involved with the summit since its inception, first as INSA's vice president for policy, and now as INSA's president. Perhaps more than anyone else, Chuck has been the brains, and I dare say sometimes the brawn, behind this extraordinary event. Chuck, thank you for everything that you have done to make the summit the national security sector's must-attend event. And thank you for your long service to INSA and to our nation. Thank you. We would like to welcome the many members of the press who are in attendance. For our speakers and panelists, please remember the summit is on the record. We will be recording all the sessions and making them available online in the next couple of weeks. If you do not have it already, I encourage you to download the Summit mobile app. It is available at both the App Store and Google Play by searching for Intelligence Summit 2019. It is a great way to keep track of the schedule and to learn about our exhibitors. The inside cover of your program has all the details. We will take audience questions throughout the program. During the plenaries here in the Chesapeake Ballroom, we will take questions via email at questions@intelsummit.org. During the 9 breakout sessions, moderators will be taking your written questions on index cards that will be available in every breakout room. As General Shea said, your engagement is critical to the success of this event. Please provide your questions as soon as you think of them rather than waiting until the end of a plenary or breakout session so that your questions can get to the moderators in time. Concise questions will be greatly appreciated. If you share images or content on social media, please use the hashtag IntelSummit19 so we can help amplify your messages.
Tish and I would like to thank the many planners from the staff from AFCEA and INSA for the hours of work they put into this event. In particular, please join us in thanking David Buckley, KPMG, Charles Clancy from MITRE, Matt Ferraro, Wilmer Hare, Bob Gorley, Huda LLC, Jim Kepper, Lockheed Martin, Kevin Levinrad, Lockheed Martin, John Martinez, Raytheon, Terry Roberts, Whitehawk, Barbara Sanderson, Northrop Grumman, Louis Shepard, VMware, and Charles Soule, iWorks. Exhibitors are central to our summit. Exhibitors come primarily from the companies that are bringing innovative capabilities to our intelligence efforts. Many are small companies where truly game-changing innovation often occurs. Engagement with them is a great way to gain increased appreciation for the innovation occurring in industry and for how innovation can be applied to increase intelligence capabilities. We've had a significant increase in the number of exhibitors this year, and I strongly encourage you to get out there and see what they have to offer. It's our hope that every attendee will spend time exploring the creative technology solutions on display and meeting the dedicated professionals behind those technologies. Also located in the kiosk area is the Professional Development Center, sponsored by the American Military University. Please consider stopping by and taking a look at what they have to offer. In addition to our exhibitors, please be sure to visit the 3 display tables presented by the top finishers in this year's EPIC Challenge: LMI, New Wave Solution, and Stabilitas. EPIC stands for Emerging Professionals in Intelligence Community, and it's the Young Professionals Group of the AFCEA Intelligence Committee. EPIC members conceived, planned, and executed the challenge, and we'll announce the winners later this afternoon. Essential leadership, guidance, and technical support was provided by Microsoft Azure Government. Finally, later today, we will host a networking reception sponsored by Raytheon just outside the ballroom. This will be a terrific opportunity to network and build and develop relationships. We hope to see you all there. That's all for now. Thanks for being here and enjoy your lunch and the camaraderie of our colleagues. A special thanks again to Lockheed Martin for sponsoring today's keynote. We'll bring you back to order at about 12:30 to hear from Michele and General Votel. Thank you all very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Marcel Lettre, Vice President for Intelligence, Lockheed Martin Government Affairs.
Good afternoon, everybody. As the voice of God said, my name is Marcel Lettre. I'm a Vice President for Intelligence at Lockheed Martin. We're one of the many great sponsors here today. I also am privileged to serve on the board of INSA. And I really love both of those roles for the opportunity it allows me to continue to serve the mission and to continue to help steward this great community that we're all part of, whether it's on the industry side or on the government side. I'm particularly honored and privileged today to be able to introduce the kickoff Fireside Chat, which consists of Michele Flournoy and General Joe Votel. There are two reasons why I'm really honored, privileged, and excited about doing so. The first is the obvious one. These are two individuals who represent some of the greatest examples of accomplished national security leaders of the generation that has served over the last 25 years in government and in the military. On their watch, General Votel, Undersecretary Flournoy, participated in a number of amazing initiatives that made the U.S. stronger, safer, more secure, and the United States military and intelligence community better than it ever was before, whether it's stewarding our way forward in Afghanistan and Iraq or across the greater Middle East, refocusing and rebalancing our efforts with regard to Asia and China, and probably most importantly, stewarding our counterterrorism operations to bring about tremendous losses on al-Qaeda, to include the operation against Osama bin Laden, and an amazing effort to pursue the defeat of ISIS in the last few years. So for these amazing accomplishments, it's particularly exciting to be part of the introduction for them, and I know this will be a great discussion to kick off our overall conference here today for those reasons. But the second reason that it's particularly exciting for me is because Secretary Flournoy and General Votel, to me, also represent great stewards of this community, whether it's the special operations enterprise, the military writ large, or the intelligence community. As consumers of intelligence, as users of the operational outputs that the intelligence community provides, but most importantly, to be frank, as leaders themselves and as mentors to many hundreds, if not thousands, of officers across the IC and across the SOF enterprise, myself included. I had the opportunity to serve with General Votel while he was in office as JSOC commander, as the commander of Special Operations Command, and at Central Command, and learned tremendously from his quiet leadership, from his mentorship of young analysts and operators. Michele Flournoy, I am particularly grateful for actually giving me my first job in the Pentagon and taking a chance on me when she didn't have to. So again, it's an honor to be able to celebrate the accomplishments of both Secretary Flournoy and General Votel with this small bit part today. And I'd like to now turn it over to Michele for the rest of the presentation. If you all could please join me in a warm welcome and round of applause for Michele Flournoy and Joe Votel. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. And Marcel, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And thanks to the sponsors, both INSA and AFCEA, for pulling such an amazing group of professionals together this afternoon. It is truly an honor for me to share the stage with General Joe Votel. He was a fantastic colleague, but also a wonderful role model of the sort of servant leader for all of us who were in government. Joe, you served as commander of US SOCOM, as commander of Central Command, during probably the busiest time ever for our armed forces in the Middle East. You were an avid and regular consumer of intelligence. I wondered, given the conference and its theme and this audience, if you'd start by just giving us a warfighter's frank assessment of the intelligence support you received. How were we doing? What were the strengths? What were the weaknesses? What were the gaps that you
thanks.
experienced?
Thanks, Michele. Let me also add my thanks to the INSA AFCEA leadership here and to all of you for being here today. And Michele, thanks for joining us here today for this panel. So you're right. I do consider myself to be a consumer and a user of the products that come out of this great intelligence community we have. So I think from a perspective of qualities and strengths, I mean, certainly great people. There was extraordinary integration at both of the commands, especially at CENTCOM, with the intelligence agencies well integrated into the command. That paid a lot of benefit for us. There were routine relationships. And there were very clear expectations there, and that was very, very good. And of course, I benefited from being the CENTCOM commander, so the focus of a lot of our efforts was in CENTCOM, and as a result, that very clear mission focus really, really helped us, and that was very, very evident to me throughout my time, certainly at CENTCOM, but at SOCOM as well. There are some challenges out there. I would highlight a few things to you. I think as we got involved in kind of our defeat ISIS activities, I think we had a struggle. I think we had a struggle. I think we've addressed it, but we will continue to struggle with the challenge of open source and publicly available information, and how we leverage that to make it truly useful for warfighters so they can understand it. I can recall the early days here of trying to understand foreign fighter movement and how much we relied on or trying to understand social media and the important role that was playing. I think that's important. We don't do anything by ourselves. We have partners with us, so I think we continue to some extent be challenged by sharing authorities with our partners and with the systems to actually share information and intelligence with them. And these are areas that we have to continue to push in. Exploitation at the speed of a campaign is an important aspect. You know, I'm sure during the conference this week you'll talk about the challenge of big data out here. Again, being a victim of my own experience, we picked up a lot of information off the battlefield in Iraq and Syria from our ISIS adversaries. But our ability to turn that and to get that into usable format and mine that data, I think is a challenge for us, continues to be a challenge for us. And we have to look at how we exploit this. This was, I think, very, very important for us. And I think the last area that I would just highlight as a challenge is human. And I don't mean that to take a dig at the human community. They do exceptional work, but I think we need more of it. You know, for combatant commanders, understanding what people are thinking, understanding how they're looking at things, having those kinds of insights, I think are extraordinarily valuable. And I think as we go forward here, I think human can be a mitigator to having to have the requirement to have large forces and large formations on the ground. It really can fill in the gaps for that. So I think continued focus in the human area is going to be important for us.
Great, thank you. Before I shift to the next question, I just wanted to let you all know I can get your questions, assuming our technology works, via iPad. So at the end, we'll leave 5-10 minutes for your questions. So please be thinking now and emailing those in so that you can join the conversation as well. So it's very clear to all of us that we're experiencing a historic kind of shift of eras with the return of great power competition, the rise of a more ambitious, possibly revisionist China, the persistence of a weak but troublesome Russia. I'd like to kind of draw you out on how we should think about this notion of competition with China and with Russia, and maybe we should deal with them separately. And what are the practical kind of priority steps for both the intelligence community and the defense community to really make that shift of focus?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. So I think at a very high level, I think this is the competition is about influence, ideas, and control of technology, and perhaps the internet and some other things here. So I mean, at a very high level, I think that's what the great power competition really means. Certainly at the military level, we look at it as a competition for maintaining competitive advantage. And when I say competitive advantage, I just don't mean weapon systems, having weapon systems that are better or faster or more effective, but it also means other things like access-basing overflight. It involves influence, it involves partnerships. There's a lot to be said for the United States having head-of-the-line privileges at the Suez Canal. That's a result of a long-term relationship with Egypt and maintaining that relationship. So these things I think are really, really important. So that's kind of how I think about it. This big competition for influence and big ideas, and ultimately investments and economic aspects, but also maintaining the competitive advantage. With respect to this community, the intelligence community, I think there are some things that need to be focused on. First and foremost, I think we need to strive to understand. Well, I would just say this. I think the most important requirement will be preventing strategic surprise here. And I think in terms of preventing strategic surprise, we have to think about understanding the intent of our adversaries out there, or other great power competitors. We have to understand what they're doing with their advanced technologies and where they are with the development of this. We have to understand how they are changing traditional relationships that we have relied on in the past, and how those can impact us in the future. I mean, I think we're seeing with Turkey, for example, an interesting development here in terms of some of the relationship they have with Russia versus NATO. This is an example of what I'm saying. And of course, they're reaching out to other traditional partners, not only in the area that I led, but really around the world. And we need to understand how those relationships are changing. I don't think we want to wake up someday and find out that the relationships we've based on are no longer in existence. And then I think, finally, we need the intelligence community, the broader national security needs to understand, I think, the relationship between Russia and China, two of the great powers that we're concerned with. I recall Secretary Mattis making a comment to a group of us one time about what could be the worst case situation here. And perhaps the worst case situation could be a stronger alignment between those two great power competitors to us and what that means to us. So I think those are the areas that from a very high strategic level we ought to be paying attention to.
Okay, great. So I spent a lot of time working on strategy in the Pentagon. The fun and easy part of developing strategy is setting priorities and where you're going to put your emphasis. The hard part about strategy is deciding where, when you don't have unlimited resources, you're going to accept and manage some degree of risk. So as the national defense strategy shifts towards this greater focus on China and Russia and great power competition, where can this community afford to take risk? Is it in your old AOR, the Middle East? Is it in certain types of military operations? How do you think about accepting and managing a degree of risk in this area?
Yeah, I think this of course, is the real challenge here. And the national defense strategy, at least the current one, promulgated under Secretary Mattis was very clear in terms of where the focus was. It was focused on great power competition and maintaining the competitive edge in that area. And I, as the CENTCOM commander, I agreed with that and testified to that fact when asked. But I think when we look at other areas, I think we have to look very carefully at what our interests are there. One of the things that strikes me about an area like the Middle East is when you think about the different interests that we have that are not just interests for today or tomorrow, but have been enduring interests, preventing this area from being a platform for terrorists to attack us, maintaining our freedom of commerce and navigation through the region, preventing instability from affecting our operations and others, preventing proliferation of nuclear weapons, and then of course maintaining a favorable balanced power. These are enduring interests for us. And so I think as we look at other areas, we have to look at how we address those interests. And I think what it requires is, when it comes to military forces, I think it requires figuring out what is sustainable in these areas, what level of military presence is required and is sustainable for persistence over time. And it will probably not be everything that we want, it certainly won't be, but it needs to be enough so that we can ensure our interests are addressed. The other aspect of this, I think, is that the National Defense Strategy puts a great focus on partnerships. And this becomes absolutely key. Just as I talked about human being a mitigator to this, partnerships can be a mitigator as well. And so making our partners strong, making sure that we have the right investments with them, we're providing them the right equipment and then the right support, I think can help offset all of this. And then of course, all of that has to be underscored by synchronization in our diplomatic, economic, informational, military realms. So we're very clear in terms of what we're trying to accomplish in each of these areas, and everybody is synchronized with respect to that.
Yes, easier said than done, as we both know. So in addition to this period of profound geopolitical change, we also are seeing a period of profound technological disruption, whether it's quantum computing, AI, machine learning, robotics, autonomy, genetic engineering, hypersonics, electric weapons, the list goes on. And many of the wonderful companies that are out on that hall are representative of the cutting edge in these areas. But in many of these areas, the US and the military rely on the sort of drivers of our innovative ecosystem, whether primarily driven by private capital in places like Silicon Valley and Route 128, and Austin and so forth. Now, if you look at how the Chinese are approaching this period of disruption, they have a multi-billion-dollar, multi-year state-directed investment program, a civil-military fusion doctrine that ensures that their private companies or state-owned enterprises are carrying water for their military and sharing the best of their innovations. So I wanted to ask you, how do you see the challenge posed by this technological competition with China? And is this community, our national security community, really ready to compete effectively?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, I think first and foremost, we have to make sure we take measures to protect ourselves. And make sure that as we begin to address this necessary competition here, we have to make sure that we have absolutely minimized our vulnerabilities in these particular areas. So, the defensive, protective aspect of all of this, I think, of protecting our technologies and capabilities, I think are very, very important. I think we ought to, clearly, I think what you're pointing towards here is stronger public-private partnerships to address these challenges that we have. Ours is a system that is driven from the private side to the public largely, and we need to learn how we leverage that. And I think it is through much more effective public-private partnerships and relationships on the very, very difficult issues. And I guess I would finally add that we have to make a commitment to prioritize and invest in the appropriate research and development on these cutting-edge technologies to ensure that we are we are where we need to be in this. And we can't rely solely on the private side. We certainly shouldn't rely on the public side to do this, the government side to do this. It has to be a partnership, but there has to be, I think, significant investment in this. And this is what I think we see the Chinese doing from their more centralized approach, is really focusing in on that and driving their investments in that area. And I think we need to do the same.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier the importance of leveraging commercially available tools, open source data, and so forth, and particularly with, just increasingly exquisite AI applications for example, maritime domain awareness, where we can literally identify, track, characterize the behavior, the pattern of life at sea of any substantial ship on the surface of the ocean. We can now leverage AI to have dramatically improved facial and object recognition. So all kinds of national security applications. And again, though, when you were at SOCOM, which is kind of famous for being one of the more agile acquirers of new technologies, but I think it's the exception that proves the rule. I mean, when you look at a lot of the companies that are out in that hallway, the smaller ones who are really bent on serving the national security community, there's still all kinds of obstacles that they face as small, innovative commercial tech companies, whether it's navigating the morass of contract vehicles, whether it's crossing what I call the valley of death between the successful prototype and the program of record. So as you think about the importance of integrating those technologies for our success and our ability to perform on the battlefield, what are the key obstacles that we need to go after and remove from your experience in SOCOM particularly?
Yeah, again, another great question. So I think the two things I learned as a SOCOM commander about this was there's really two things you have to do. I mean, there's many things you have to do, but I think first of all, you have to have a strategy for what you're doing technologically, how you're developing this, and a plan for how you're approaching that. And as you mentioned, I think we were blessed at SOCOM with a group of people who were very good at doing that and having a plan for the key things that we were focused on that were important to the soft team out there. So, having a strategy that identifies the development, the investments is a really important aspect of this. I think the other key on the soft side, and from my experience at SOCOM, was keeping the users close to the developers in this. To me, that was absolutely essential. Some of you have probably had the opportunity to visit SoftWorks down in Tampa, something that was stood up by SOCOM several years ago. I presume it's still going on, but this was really focused on trying to provide an entrance, a doorway for people to kind of come in, present their capabilities, and look at how they can integrate, and then to have users there who could provide almost immediate feedback, and leveraging concepts like rapid prototyping. So not only are you testing the viability of it, but you're also looking at ways you can speed up the introduction of this to our fighters around the world. So I think those two things really stand out for me. In an earlier life, I had an opportunity to lead kind of our IED efforts. There was nothing in my career as a ranger, as an infantryman, that prepared me for that. It was one of the single biggest challenges I ever had. But what I came to recognize out of that, because when we looked at this, we began to look at the IED, initially looking at the IED challenge as a technical problem. And that we could solve this if we had a Manhattan Project, if we just had the right box, if we figured out the right tool, we could solve that. But what we came to realize was that we had to look at it much more comprehensively. And so we had to look not just at the technology aspect, but we had to look at the training aspect of it. We had to look at the targeting aspect of it. And so my point here is that when we look at these challenges that we have out here, whether it's any of the things AI, advanced weapons, automation, a variety of different things out here, we really need to look at how we are organized for this to attack the problem comprehensively and address it that way. It does nothing to develop a good piece of technology if people aren't trained on it. And if it does nothing to develop good technology if we aren't putting pressure on the enemy at the same time we're doing that to prevent him from responding to that. So I think the key piece here is you've got to organize and you've got to make sure we have a comprehensive approach to these challenges.
Great. I want to bring in a question from the audience, which really pertains to leadership. It says, as a former military commander, how did you ensure that you remained open to intelligence assessments that did not comport with your view of a situation? It's really a question about different views and dissent.
Yeah, so one of the things I started to do at SOCOM, and I took it over to CENTCOM with me, was every morning when you got the read book, if you will, that kind of gave you the overnight intelligence and the other thing, I got in the habit of bringing in an intelligence analyst who would come in and be with me when I went through that. And ultimately, we had 2 of them in there as we kind of developed the process. And what that gave me an opportunity to do was to look at the report and actually have a conversation with somebody about what I was reading here. And that was very, very helpful in terms of my understanding and being able to challenge some of my interpretation of what was happening out there versus what our very excellent analysts were seeing. And to me, that was a great process. The other thing I think that we did were things like deep dives. We had tried to do them on a weekly basis, probably ended up being a couple times a month, but it was an opportunity for the J2 many times to direct J2 in conjunction with Chief of Staff as well as to direct the topics that we wanted to talk about, and then for me to talk with a variety of analysts who presented information to me, some of which was contrary to what I thought. So, as a commander, I thought it was my responsibility to try to get a lot of different views into this thing and into the things that we were doing, and for me, those were some of the practical aspects of it as well. And of course, just like anybody else, there's another layer of leadership out there, and our component commanders and JTF commanders who have a different assessment. So there has to be, I think one of the most important things you do as a commander is make sure that you set the environment so there can be a dialogue, there can be a discussion about what's happening out here and how we're assessing it and how we're interpreting what's happening. And I think that was, I think perhaps one of the most important leadership things that people can do to especially as we kind of navigate this really complex environment that we find ourselves in.
I could not agree more. Another great question from the audience about Russian influence operations. So how much concern do you have with Russian offensive influence operations generally, but in particular those that might be directed at U.S. troops?
I think we should be very concerned about what Russia is doing with these capabilities, and both in the information environment and then both in the electronic environment that can impact our weapons. We should not make any assumptions that our objectives are aligned in these particular areas here, and so I remain very, very concerned about this. As we become more technologically enabled, more in the digits, more into the electronic aspect of things, I think we increase our vulnerability. So we have to really be concerned about what Russia is trying to do.
Yeah. I wanted to come back to your comment about the importance of allies and partners. And this is a tremendous source of strategic advantage for the United States, particularly when you contrast our position with a host of allies around the world versus, say, a China or a Russia who don't enjoy that benefit. So the question is there a more a strategic approach that we can take to working with our allies, to building partner capacity, to getting ourselves on the same page so that we have a shared set of capabilities to be more effective together against some of these big challenges?
I think there are some things, particularly if you look at the technology side. I think we have to look at the more traditional things like our Five Eyes arrangements that have served us extraordinarily well. But frankly, some of our, while the Five Eyes are great partners to us, we have equally excellent partners outside of the Five Eyes community. And so we have to look at how we share information and development of these key technologies with them as well. So I think we just have to look at how we open this up. I think we've made some progress in these areas, but there's more that needs to be done. And I couldn't agree with you more here. This really is our strategic advantage, I think, is our partnerships out here. When you look at You know, just take Iran, for example. I'll stay in the area that I'm most familiar with. When you look at the people that are aligned with Iran, and you look at the people that are aligned with the United States and the West, it's not even comparable. So this really is an important advantage for us, and we have to look at our relationships multi-echelon. It's not enough for me to have a relationship with my counterpart. It's got to be my subordinate commanders. It's got to be our diplomats. It's got to be others above us as we look at these partners. We have to be very clear with them about what we're doing. It's important to understand objectives. It's important to understand what it is that they are focused on. It's important to understand what the red lines are in this. And I think when we get into those levels of conversations with our partners, I think that serves us very, very well.
Great. A question about from the audience again about space. Critical domain, maybe more so than it's ever been. So the question is, what are your thoughts on space and support for the warfighter? How should we organize, and what should be our priorities?
Well, I think a great question, and I'll stay away from Space Force here for a moment. But I think, first of all, I think organizing a combatant command around space, I think, is a really good step. I think we've certainly seen that. I mean, there's a former SOCOM commander. I know Tony Thomas is out here as well, and so I'm sure he shares the same thing, that the soft community and being able to bring those capabilities to the broader Department of Defense has been enabled by that. And I think as you look at our other functional or global combatant commands out there, whether it's transportation or strategic command or some of the others here, that we're well served by that. So I think that's the right piece. I think, like cyber, I think looking at how we integrate space capabilities with things that are happening on the ground, I think has got to be a priority for us. And these can't be one-off things. We have to look at how space is integrated into the things that we're actually trying to accomplish in other areas. So I think the challenge for us as we move forward in space will be looking at how we integrate those capabilities into the other toolkit that belongs to our warfighters.
Absolutely. Well, we could go on. We have some great additional questions, but I'm getting the high sign. Please join me in thanking Joe Votel, a national treasure, for a wonderful conversation.
Michele and Joe, what a terrific start to our symposium here these 2 days. From maintaining our competitive advantage to dealing with the profound technological change we find ourselves within. And Joe, as you talked about the public-private partnership, that's what AFCEA and INSA are all about. That's what this summit is all about. I don't think we could have had a better conversation to kick off the remaining sessions that we're going to have. So thank you all so much.
Thanks so much.
Michele, thank you. And another warm round. Our first networking break starts now, followed by breakout sessions at 1:35 p.m. in the rooms indicated on the screens behind me. Okay, you guys have all downloaded the app, so you know where everything is. We will reconvene back here in the Maryland Ballroom at 3:15. Thank you all very much.